story. Today we come to the division of Israel into two separate kingdoms. Now, as we look back through all the stories that we've related to so far, I think there's one thing that remained constant throughout, and that is God requires us to be obedient, even if it's not to our liking. The time has come where Solomon's reign is coming to an end. And there are two new characters that come on the scene. They are Jeroboam and Rehoboam. At this particular point in the story, God has been using the nation of Israel as a way to reveal his character to the world. He did this so that they would also be drawn in to a relationship with God. Now, when Israel all got along very well and did what was right in the way of the Lord, they prospered. The other nations, they would catch this glimpse of what it would be like to be a part of God's family. And then when Israel would turn their backs on God and they would act selfishly, God would discipline them because he needed to be sure that his nation accurately reflected who he was and the kind of community that he was building. During the reign of Solomon, God's reflection became distorted, which could only mean that Israel was about to be disciplined. This begins with Jeroboam, who is one of Solomon's officials. After Solomon dies, his son Rehoboam becomes the king. Solomon had accumulated much of his wealth the old-fashioned way through high taxes and forced labor. Jeroboam and a crowd of angry citizens come to Rehoboam and they ask him to give them some relief, treat them better than his father had. And King Rehoboam replies to him, "You think that was bad? You ain't seen nothing yet." So Jeroboam and his followers, they all say, "You know what? We're out of here." They retreat to the tribal regions of the north, and they make Jeroboam the king over the 10 tribes of Israel, while Rehoboam, he remained king over Judah and Benjamin. This once proud, prosperous nation is now a divided kingdom, with Israel in the north and Judah to the south. This internal strife and the division of the nation has all the qualities of an epic movie. One that would have a cast of thousands with those spectacular special effects. The lower story point of view is as old as time itself. A king mistreats his people. A courageous revolutionary leads a rebellion against the king. A struggle for power ensues, and eventually the kingdom is divided. Now, if we dig deep into this lower story, we find that Rehoboam could have avoided this whole sticky mess had he listened to the right group of people. So let's back up in the story for just a moment. Jeroboam comes and he asks for this kinder, gentler government to rule over the people. So Rehoboam, he goes and he consults first with some of his father's trusted advisors. They tell him, you know, it'd be a lot better if you just lightened up and your people, they will be loyal to you until the end. After he listens to them, he goes and asks some of his buddies they grew up with. This younger crowd, they tell him, you know what? Be like your dad and rule with an iron fist. So Rehoboam follows his friend's advice. With this insight, who could blame Jeroboam for leading a rebellion and then setting up his own kingdom? Who could blame Rehoboam for retaliating and mounting up his troops in preparation for a battle and an effort to regain the territory of these rebel forces? While reading this episode, you can almost hear the music building in the background. You can imagine the horses galloping northward, the soldiers clutching the reins in one hand and brandishing their swords in the other. The scene becomes a compilation of Ben-Hur, Gladiator, Troy, and Star Wars all rolled into one. Except there isn't a battle. To understand this better, we have to look at the upper story. God is up to something in this chaotic series of events that his chosen nation is going through. We know that God wasn't taking a break and just letting things roll and happen as they would. Instead, he is using this series of events to bring all of us back into that perfect community they set out to form. Our lower story view tells us that Rehoboam had every right to launch this massive attack against the northern kingdom rebels. He was close to doing this when God steps in and he offered a glimpse into his plans. And he told him these words. God said, "Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, to all of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, this is what the Lord says. Do not go up to fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing." So they obeyed the word of the Lord, and they went home again as the Lord had ordered. 1 Kings 12, 23 through 24. This is my doing. It sounds as if God is saying, I was behind this from the very beginning. I knew you would heed the advice of your yes men instead of what your father's advisors told you to do. I knew Jeroboam would rebel against you, and I knew you would try everything in your power to return this divided kingdom back to its glory days. But it's in my power, not yours. So go home. Your role is just about over. Now, God had orchestrated this all along. The question comes to mind, why? Why would he do this? Well, like all good movies, we need to understand the theme. By the time we come to the end of a well-scripted and well-directed movie, we discover it contains a theme or a message for us. On the lower story level, this theme of this story is pretty obvious. Leaders who treat their followers poorly will face rebellion. Rehoboam was clearly the bad guy and Jeroboam the hero. It's a great message, one that God would surely support, right? Well, this isn't the theme of this message. The upper story theme has little to do with these bad rulers and the rebels. It isn't about the main characters at all. It's not even about the setting or the plot. A short, simple summary of God's message in this story is, I keep my word. God does what he says because he longs for everyone to have the opportunity to reside in this perfect community. We have seen already in the story that God made promises or covenants with his people. He promised Abraham that he would make a great nation out of him from his offspring, despite the fact that his wife and he were beyond childbearing years. God kept his promise. God promised Moses that if the people of Israel kept his laws, he would bless them. He also told them if they turned from his laws, he would discipline them, because he is a just and a fair God. He kept that promise. He made a promise to David, one that was built on the promises of Abraham and Moses, that he would make Israel a great nation. God took it one step further with David, and he promised that his tribe of Judah would be established forever. God had his plan of inviting us back into a relationship with him through Jesus, the Messiah, who would come through that line of David. Jesus would rule forever as King of Kings. Because of David's love for God, this perfect community God is building will be traced back through his roots. From the lower story, it appears as if Rehoboam is the one who's being disciplined for his actions. And because of this tribe of Judah is weakened and will be fading away forever. Rehoboam went to the wrong people for advice, so it ended up appearing as if he had made a bad choice. The only problem is we know God's promise, and we know God always keeps his promises. God will establish his perfect kingdom with or without you or me. Both Rehoboam and Jeroboam, eventually they turned their backs on God completely. But it didn't matter. God's plan of offering us relief for the sinful nature that we inherited from Adam and Eve will come about through Judah, with or without the cooperation of Jeroboam or Rehoboam. If we look to the New Testament, God gives us a promise also. He declared in Matthew 16:18, he said, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." God didn't say, "I might build my church," or "I hope to build my church." Instead, he declares a non-negotiable truth. He will build his church that demonstrates the good news that everyone in the human family, all races, all colors, all nationalities, are included in that perfect community that he is building. And he will do it with or without you. We know that nothing harms a church more than when its people reflect the wrong image of who God is. We do this when we show unkindness to others, to our brothers and sisters, to the poor, to the widows, to the strangers who are among us. We do this when we are dishonest in our business practices, or when we let anger get the best of us. Our actions, they harm the church and God's image, but they don't stop it. God will continue building his church with or without you. Wouldn't you much rather prefer that he did it with you? We have that privilege of showing others what God is like. How you live today may result in someone changing their negative ideas about God and being drawn to find true life in him. We each have opportunities every day to live obediently so that everyone around us can see who God is and what he is really like. God didn't force Rehoboam to do the right thing, but instead he allowed his behavior to help fulfill God's promise that he made to David. God calls us to be bigger than our own lives and to be bigger than our likes and our dislikes, our petty differences that were abundant in our lower story perspective. God calls us to trust Him enough to obey Him at all times. God will accomplish His mission to bring people into a relationship with Him in that perfect community, with or without you. Wouldn't you prefer to be used by God because of what you do, rather in spite of your disobedience? Amen. Please stand.